Steven Kotler. Welcome to Flow Sessions.
Jason Silva, it's good to be with you, brother.
How are you, man?
I'm really well. How are you?
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. You and I have been friends for a number of years. I love your brain. I respect you. I'm in awe of you. I often call you late at night when I have some deep, pressing question about neuroscience, consciousness, psychedelics, altered states, techno-utopianism, and all that jazz. And I thought, man, we've done all these live events together. We've recorded our conversations on stage together, but we've never really done something where we have absolute control over the environment. And I'm hoping that this is an opportunity for us to get a deep dive.
You're going to mess with me, right? Like the environment's going to change. Dancing girls are going to run out from behind the curtains or something.
No. This is not a brain game. This is just so often when we're together, I'm left with many more questions. And so I thought that this was an opportunity for us to really deep dive into so many things.
Let's do it.
So here we go, man. Flow saved your life.
It did.
This is one of the things that you've written about, talked about. You've written a book about human performance called The Rise of Superman. You co-wrote Stealing Fire. You are known as an expert in flow, the state of consciousness in which human beings feel their very best and perform their very best. And in an age where everyone's looking for a quick fix, the self-help guide to a happy life, I am curious, for those that don't know, and also for me to hear it again, what is flow exactly? Why is it so addicting and or irresistible? How can it make our lives better? And how did it save your life?
Let's start with definitions.
Please.
You had the right definition. The scientific definition of flow is what you said. Mm-hmm. More colloquial, right? It's those moments of rapt attention and total absorption where people get so focused on the task at hand that everything else just disappears. Mm-hmm. Action and awareness will merge. Sense of self will vanish. Time dilates, which is a fancy way of saying it passes strangely, right? Sometimes it slows down. You get a freeze frame effect. More frequently, it speeds up, and 5 hours pass by in like 5 minutes. And throughout, all aspects of performance, mental and physical, go through the roof. So that's the colloquial definition. That's the phenomenology, right? That's the experience.
That's the felt experience.
That's the felt experience.
Time falls away. Your sense of self vanishes. You're freed from the monkey mind and the inner chatter, all of these things.
I always like to point out, because this wasn't the case for a really long time, but it is the case now, is that when we say flow now, when researchers say flow, what they're really saying is a very precise, we understand what neurochemicals show up in the state. We understand what neuroelectricity does in the state. We know which networks are active and which ones are inactive. We know which parts of the brain are active and which ones are inactive. We know what a lot of your physiological signals are. And by the way, the physiology, when I wrote Rise of Superman, just that work, I don't even know if that work had been published yet. So this is all in the past 5-6 years. We have made massive amounts of progress in sort of decoding the neurobiology of flow. And by we, I mean all the researchers in the field. I've got a lab, but I mean everybody who's working on this stuff. To answer your second question, which is why do we like it so much? What's the big deal? So among the other things that happen in flow is you get some combination of 5 extremely potent pleasure chemicals: norepinephrine, dopamine, anandamide, endorphins, and serotonin, possibly serotonin.
So you get flooded with all of them.
Yeah, and these are all feel-good drugs, right? Mm-hmm. So every time there's a drug in the world, it's an exogenous chemical, right? We have endogenous versions of every. Like when we take cocaine, right, this was how we learned about neurochemistry. People were getting addicted to heroin.
Yeah.
This is 50s, 60s, and people were like, well, here's a drug that's 2,000 years old.
Yeah.
What's it attaching to in the brain that's producing this addiction?
Yeah.
Right? And we discovered we have natural heroin, right? Endorphins, right?
Yeah.
And also, just to give you an idea, so you get endorphins in flow. There are about 20 different endorphins in the brain. The most common one, which shows up in flow, is 100 times more potent than medical morphine. So when we say you're getting pleasure chemicals, right? Like the brain's version is much better than the street drug, first of all, most of the time. Second of all, you can't cocktail the street versions of it. If you were to take, I just listed, cocaine is dopamine, norepinephrine is speed, anandamide is marijuana, serotonin is either ecstasy, MDMA, or LSD, depending on the pathway, right? Norepinephrine is speed. You want to do those combinations of street drugs, you're going to probably end up in the hospital or in a coma or dead. It doesn't work. Brain cocktails them naturally and normally, which is really quite amazing because, for example, it is very difficult. People who experiment with MDMA and cocaine, for example, will discover that the cocaine wins. Dopamine is more powerful than serotonin, essentially, and it will swamp the experience. And you'll be on cocaine, you won't be on Molly. The brain seems to allow some coexistence between these substances, and they can both be in your system sort of at the same time. And right? So we can do stuff internally that you can't do externally. So the big deal here is...
The big deal is that it's essentially the best high in the world.
Period.
If you
Period.
can get
It's
it.
the
unique chemical composition,
it's
the
the experience
cocktail.
we like the most.
The experience
right?
we like the most.
And
these are the moments that take our breath away. These are the endless summers. This is like falling in love for the first time. This is like witnessing the birth of a child. This is like the sport that you love the most in the world where you lose track of time. I mean, this is
all that
the stuff poetry is made of.
A couple things that are worth pointing out also is it's not just pleasure. If it was just pleasure, it was just a high, right?
It's pleasure coupled with performance.
And meaning. That's the key. So when positive psychologists talk about happiness, they talk about 3 levels of happiness that you can obtain. Level 1 is happiness. It's pleasure. It's hedonism. How do you feel right now?
Sure.
And the truth of the matter is we have emotional set points. There's only so much you can do there. Yeah, you can have a gratitude practice. Yeah, you can have a meditation practice. Yeah, it'll make you feel a little bit better. But it's not. There's not a big lever there, right?
With pleasure.
With just happiness. Yeah, with just pleasure. It's a lousy strategy for happiness.
I've had conversations, and some people don't fully understand, where I say that for me, sexual satisfaction is cognitively oriented, that I am cognitively oriented, that if I just have physical pleasure, that if I just treat sex physiologically, drop into your body, feel the sensations, that's actually doesn't give me as much pleasure. Like if I want to do that, I could just self-pleasure, masturbate, and have the physiological response of orgasm, and that's it. But the true satisfaction, what really arouses and engages me, has always been cognitively oriented. What is the scene that is unfolding? What is my sexual partner doing? How is she surrendering in a way that makes me want to surrender? What is the boost of esteem that I'm getting from being mirrored by this person or seen in a certain way?
And you wonder why you're so neurotic.
But the point is, the scene, the setting, the framing, the movie is cognitively oriented, and it's what gets me off because it's preoccupied with meaning. What does this mean? And it's the layer of meaning that it builds on top of the physical pleasure that is where I get the real pleasure. So it sounds like you're talking about that too.
Yeah,
that
so
flow.
level 2 happiness is engagement. It's a high engagement life.
Right.
Lots of flow. It's a high flow lifestyle. So level 1 is pleasure. Level 2 is high flow. Level 3 is high flow plus purpose. So I'm doing something that produces a tremendous amount of flow that is serving a cause greater than myself.
Oh, well, this reminds me.
Those are the 3 levels.
Well, this reminds me of that equation, that Venn diagram that you came up with for that Forbes article you wrote about how to find your passion. And I don't want to get off the topic of flow, but just for those that are listening, because this was very interesting, is that people often struggle with finding their passion. There's such a pressure in the world telling you that if you find your passion, you'll find happiness, you'll find things. And people are like, well, what the fuck? I don't know. I'm just figuring it out, And so what you said was, maybe what you want to start with is making a list of things you're curious about. Those are easier to identify than your one North Star, your one passion. So you're make a list of 5 to 15 things.
25
things you're really curious about, and then find a couple that overlap. How many was it?
Yeah,
5?
3 to 5.
3 to 5 that overlap, and then you say when multiple curiosities overlap is a sign of neurobiology. It means you're starting to get that combination of pleasure and meaning and cognitive engagement and all that jazz because there's multiple curiosities like overlapping, like how beautiful that is. And so then that's like the beginning of your passion. And then you say find a need in the world that can be served by these overlapping curiosities, and now the passion turns into a purpose. So it's like you were hitting at that, but I guess this whole thing is connected back to this flow of like pleasure, meaning, level 1, level 2 happiness. So keep going. So
it's all this. I mean,
so
meaning, by the way,
time
out.
Yeah.
Flow states have triggers, preconditions that lead to more flow, right? This is a lot of the work that I've been involved in.
Okay, so this goes into the idea of like how to
train flow,
how to train for flow, how to contextualize or precondition spaces that lead to the emergence of flow, like a flame that comes into existence when the conditions are right.
Let's talk about it. At the Flow Research Collective, my organization, our trainings, flow is really trainable is my point. Like we are getting, and we're using the same psychometric instrument everybody else is measuring flow with, Csikszentmihalyi's original scale. We're getting
Csikszentmihalyi. I learned how to say his name.
Nice. We're getting an 80% boost in flow on the back end. My point is it's really trainable. There is a massive return to baseline afterwards in certain patient populations. Usually peak performers can keep going. Everybody else has a big return to baseline, and there are a number of reasons for that. We don't have to go into that. My point is it's trainable, and what we're training people in...
Flow is trainable.
These triggers, right? Flow follows focus. It shows up when all of our attention is in the right here, right now. That's what all the triggers do. They drive attention.
Let's unpack that. So flow follows focus, because often when people hear about flow, or they watch my videos where I seem to be in flow, or they read your books all about flow, or they see elite athletes constantly superseding what came before and pushing the limitations of human possibility, being in these states of flow, everybody's like, well, how do I get that? If I'm not a professional snowboarder, how do I get that? And so you're talking about these flow triggers, and the first thing you say is the flow follows focus. So attention is a precursor for a flow experience.
So let me take it one step further, because we speak neuroscience. It appears the flow triggers do one of three things. Mm-hmm. They either push norepinephrine or dopamine into our system. So norepinephrine is one of the main, it's a pleasure chemical, but it's one of the main focusing chemicals, right? We feel it as excitement or anxiety, but we feel it as excitement, but more attention to the present. Dopamine, same thing. Pleasure and a lot of attention to the present. So the flow triggers are either pushing dopamine into your system to drive focus and thus push you into flow, norepinephrine, or they're lowering cognitive load. So all the shit you're trying to think about at once, right? The weight of the now. If I lower that, you have more energy to pay attention to the present, right?
Well, but that's the thing. That's not always easy, right? Flow follows focus, and focusing on the present is typically elusive because human beings now spend a lot of time either worried about the future or regretting or replaying events from the past. One of the most interesting passages in Michael Pollan's new book, How to Change Your Mind About Psychedelic Psychotherapy, was actually the preface, where he kind of has this paragraph that describes sort of the essence of the human default setting. And he says, look, the brain is like an artificial intelligence program. Takes in data from the present and compares it with data from the past and uses it to make predictions about the future. So we're future tense with a low-level hum of anxiety at all times. And then he has this funny line. The good news is I'm seldom surprised, right? Nothing's going to sideline me because I'm always preparing and mitigating against future threats. But then he goes, but the bad news is I'm seldom surprised. Nothing ever delights me or surprises me in a good or positive way. So then he goes on, after this bummer of the low-level hum of anxiety, future tense orientation, he says that what commends travel, beauty, and certain kinds of drugs, and I would argue that all of these things potentially are flow triggers, what commends them is that they knock all signals forwards and backwards offline. So the future predicting, trying to imagine what's next, and the comparing with the past, they get knocked offline, hurling us into the flow of the present, right? His words, flow of the present. I don't even know he knew he was using the term flow, but flow of the present, and I continue to quote, a present that is literally wonderful, right? Wonder, being the byproduct of that unencumbered sense of first sight or virginal noticing to which the adult brain has closed itself. Now, wonder for me, wonder and awe is one of the most positively enjoyable subjective states there can be. But wonder requires that unencumbered sense of first sight, that childlike innocence, that non-adult jadedness that is the been there's and seen that's of the adult mind, which is, again, part of our future-oriented default setting. Because it's so fucking hard to stop and smell the roses. Or Blake's world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, infinity in the palms of our hands and eternity in an hour. Because, again, flow follows focus sounds like a simple formula, but it's really fucking hard to focus on the present because our default is not that. Our default is future-oriented and negatively parsing that future and mitigating against future risk. It's the 21st century neurotic default setting. So back to the question of hand. Flow triggers, right? Things that can knock those signals forwards and backwards offline so that way we may be present, or free up the cognitive real estate to be present so that flow can follow focus. So how the fuck do we do that? What are these flow triggers?
You named a bunch of them.
Right.
You get novelty,
yes,
complexity, unpredictability, pattern recognition, linking ideas together. Risk. These are all dopamine triggers, right? This is all driving massive quantities of dopamine.
Okay, so but back to where we started. I'm in a relationship for 1 year, and my girlfriend will criticize me because she says that all I want is to always be traveling around, that I like novelty so much, and that somehow makes me a difficult person to date because she says I'd never be satisfied in a stable situation because I always want to change things up and go explore and trigger novelty. And I talk about novelty as if it's oxygen. I'm like, what do you like? I'm like, I like novelty. I need to go to new places. I need to go to new hikes. I need to go to new things. I need to have new conversations because otherwise my default is this like neurotic future.
But the other thing is novelty, but your novelty is really bounded. You want specific kinds of, you want a new hike. Right? It's not, I'm open to anything, bring it on. It's, no, I really like hiking in nature, and if you want to show me some different nature, I'm down. Yeah. Right? And your city, like your list of cities, like, Jason, you want to go like backpack around to Ulaanbaatar and, with an knapsack? The answer is no. No, I know you, right? It's so you want novelty inside a very specific boundary. So you can tell her to just calm down. You only want novelty in things that she already likes to do. So
you're going to save my relationship. No, but let's get into this. Let's go
punch you the next time she sees me is what's going to happen.
No, but this is huge because this back to the flow triggers, because I know the people listening at home or after, I do have people always asking me like, what's the recipe? So let's really unpack this. So what constitutes novelty? How much do you have to violate your expectations?
Let's start really simply.
Yeah, okay.
Right? Like
Great.
This is like first thing I do when I walk into an organization is I say, look, guys, if you can't hang a sign on your door that says, fuck off, I'm flowing, can't do this work. Flow demands uninterrupted periods of concentration.
Well, that's why I set up the studio like this.
First things first. So, first thing I have people do is when you finish your workday, at the end of your workday, distraction management. Anything that could distract you from your first 90-minute work session the next day, turn it off the night before. Shut down your email, shut down your phone, turn on blah, 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 right? If your main distractions are your kids or your husband or whatever it is, you got this 90-minute period that I'm going to start my day with. And unless your circadian rhythms are such that you're a night owl, you want it to be first thing in the morning, right? Like that's when we're most focused, most alert, most able to do our hardest tasks, unless you're a night owl. And then you want to start your night owl session that way, right?
Yeah, well, for me, it's drinking coffee, sitting on the toilet. But like my girlfriend
After that.
Okay. But my girlfriend will often tell me, and this is interesting, that her morning sacred practice is crucial. Right, she wants to sit and meditate and drink her tea for that first hour and a half in the morning. People have these
hippies.
No. But people have these morning sacred practices, and I totally respect that. And I guess the question for me is, when I hear somebody make a demand about a morning practice, I'm like, well, why can't you do that with me? But I guess what you're saying is
you have a morning practice
but
too.
What you're saying is that we should be really strict and non-compromising about what we need in our morning practice
for
for
sure
flow.
With peak performance across the boards. I always say this to people. under the hood, peak performance doesn't look like anything other than a checklist. You wake up, you got 10 things on your checklist, you're great at all of them, and when you're done with your checklist, you're going to get some exercise, you're going to eat high-quality food, you're going to have an active recovery practice, you're not just going to sit down, drink a beer, and watch TV.
Right.
You're going to do some yoga, get a sauna, take a hot bath, right? You're going to take care of your body a little bit, and then you're going to try to have some kind of social contact, right? What DC and Ryan call relatedness, right? That's, and then you do it again. And that's what high performance really looks like under the hood. It's a checklist.
So it's so funny because I often, people, one of the criticisms that I get from people who are close to me, friends and people that know me a little bit is that they love my videos and they see this looseness and this dance and this flow and this jazz in the content that I do when I'm at my most creative, my most flow. And then they ask me all these questions about it. And when I list my preconditions and my checklist and all the discipline that goes into orienting my life around these states, they're like, dude, like you need to learn to like surrender. Exactly. You need to learn to like just like let go and like loosen up and lighten up. And while I know that they mean it from a good place because they sense in me a controlling tendency, but the Venn diagram that I prefer, going back to this Venn diagram analysis, is flow is what is in between discipline and surrender. It's not just surrender, and it's also not just discipline, but that when they overlap, the flow is a kind of discipline surrender.
The whole notion that flow has anything to do with surrender, that's a whole bunch. So what flow does produce, Dangers of Stir wrote about it in Stealing Fire.
We'll get into that after.
But this is classic example of bliss junkiedom. People taste a little bit of flow and they're like, oh, I just have to surrender to my life and I'll get carried. You're out of your freaking mind. Like, that's not how the state works at all.
So please get into this. Please get into the dangers of this cult of surrender.
Well, so let me give you a mountain biking is a great example.
Okay.
This happens all the time, by the way, to mountain bikers. Even mountain bikers will make this mistake. You'll want to go out for a flowy ride, right? Mountain biking, especially I'm a downhiller, but even cross country can be this. Mountain biking is a violent sport. It is especially downhill, it's violent. The bike shakes. You have to, it requires a lot of, if you go out and try to have a flowy mountain bike ride, you're going to the hospital. You have to attack the frickin' mountain. In fact, this is Greg Burns' work, a brilliant mind at Emory. He argued in his book Satisfaction that and there's proof for this, that at the front end of a flow state, before you can get into flow, so we know two things happen. One, you have the challenge goes up, right? In your brain, you have a negative reaction. You literally go, crap, right? You have one of those. Right before you go into flow, it always happens. And then Greg Burns argues, if you meet that with testosterone, and that leads into dopamine, which leads into flow. I don't know if he's right. Nobody's looked at the testosterone theory yet, but it maps. If you you have to attack to get into flow because you need all that focus. Yeah. There's nothing you don't day trip into flow. It doesn't work that way. It's an action state and you have to work to get in it. And by the way, everything you just said, I think, even in Zero to Dangerous, right, in the training that I do, I can't put a number on it, but 50 to 60% of what I'm doing is teaching you how to put flow at the center of your schedule and build your life around it, right? That's what the best organizations have done. That's what the best individuals have done. And you're absolutely right. You need a pretty rigorous schedule. You need flexibility inside of it, right? You do. You want flexibility inside your limits, but you absolutely have to have those limits. And once you try to remove them, right, which you see in the whole Burning Man crowd, the hippie crowd, you're probably going to make yourself miserable waiting for a state that's not going to show up because you're not doing the very things
you're not
your
doing
body
the discipline.
Needs.
Well, it's like that book, right? After the Ecstasy, the Laundry, or the whole thing about fetching water and chopping wood, or Flaubert's line that says, be disciplined and orderly in your life so that you may be violent and original in your work. But essentially, he's saying the same thing. So when I tell people, I'm like, look, my flow allows me to supersede my limits again and again and again. My gymnastics, my achieving the impossible that I do in my creative work, or I aspire to do in my creative work, means that in many other aspects of my life, I am monk-like and circumscribed and disciplined. I'm disciplined about my sleep. I'm disciplined about quiet. I'm disciplined about when I eat. I'm disciplined about when I go to the bathroom. Like, I'm super disciplined in all these other ways.
And what you eat and how you act. I mean, like, you're disciplined. Like, people have no idea how much discipline there is.
That's right.
Yeah, it's massive.
But it has become this thing where it's like, because what we produce when we're in flow feels like ecstatic surrender, right? You move beyond the self and you're free of the discipline. It presents itself that way, experientially looks that way. People mirror it that way. It has people in response to that have participated in the creation of this expectation, this cult of surrender, where everybody's like, just let go, or you just have to surrender. Just surrender, let go. And it is this cult of surrender has come at the expense of I think, the rigor and the hard work and the discipline that goes into building your life around these states that allow you to overcome your limitations.
Ignorant of the biology is what it is. It's just ignorant of the biology.
So let's get into that.
I always say, and this is a core thing for me, and I'll tell you the story.
Well, these people, what happens is they have flow-like experiences once, and then they think that biology isn't real, that the soul is immaterial, and that you just have to let go.
And maybe they're right. I don't know everything, right? Maybe they're right. Okay. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe 150 years of cognitive neuroscience. Who knows, right? But let's continue on this. So we're talking about these flow triggers, and we're talking about novelty, and we're talking about how to instrument a kind of novelty, and how to be disciplined in crafting the. I guess you could call it set and setting. Treat your flow like a psychedelic trip. What's the set? What's the setting? Weird.
What's the intention? What's the pre-expectation? What's the pre-construction?
That's why we partnered with Imperial College. Like, my organization partnered with Imperial College. We're Mendel Kaleem, and Mendel has developed a diagnostic.
Oh, I know Mendel. So Imperial College of London, by the way, is doing all this amazing psychedelic research for psychedelic. Robin Carhart-Harris and Mendel Kaelin is doing the Wave Paths app, which is using music to help people achieve psychedelic healing with just music, like tripping on music alone.
Well, he's also designing music for psychedelic therapy, right? Brilliant, great work.
Yeah,
but Mendel. So, set and setting, right? Goes back to the 60s, and we know this idea. Mendel asked a really great question 4 or 5 years ago. Well, what the fuck does set and setting mean?
Yeah.
Right? And he realized that nobody, from a scientific perspective, you didn't have to take the cap off. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought it was just Steven proof because he knew I was going to knock it over. But no.
Mendel set and setting.
Realized that we didn't know what set and setting meant. So he set out to build a diagnostic for set and setting. What do we actually mean by set and setting? What real factors go into it? Blah, blah, blah. And I think it was a huge diagnostic in the beginning. I think they've got it shrunk down somewhere around 50 questions. So we took that, and there are 22 flow triggers that we know of, right?
Okay.
And we mapped them onto one another, and we're still doing. We just wrapped it actually last week. We did a big study, multi-year study, comparing set and setting for psychedelic experiences versus set and setting for flow.
Oh, so you know what's so crazy about hearing you say this? That this is something that intuitively has emerged for me in conversation, where I'm like, set and setting is everything. Maybe it's because I have a relationship with cannabis and flow, and cannabis has been used by jazz musicians forever for its improvisational capacities as a catalyst for improvisation, or freestyle rappers and cannabis. But cannabis is also a kind of psychedelic. It is a psychedelic. And so set and setting tends to inform the experience that you have. And because I associate cannabis with flow, and I know that I have to be sensitive for set and setting, as with all plant medicines and psychoactives, then
Please don't say the phrase plant medicine around me. We're doing drugs, people. It's just drugs.
Okay. So but back to this idea that me attributing the importance or identifying the importance of set and setting as precursors for flow and also precursors for psychedelics makes sense. Set and setting for flow is essentially the flow triggers. What's the checklist?
And by the way, you're particularly susceptible to certain triggers, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there are certain triggers that aren't going to work for you at all. I can tell you, right? Like novelty, right? You like a certain amount of dopamine and complexity, right? And when I say complexity, I don't mean I'm confused. I mean the brain, geological time, right? You're standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon and your brain goes, oh my God, this is millions and millions and millions, right? Like, and you,
cognitively oriented. Diana Slattery once called me a cognitive ecstasy addict.
She's not wrong.
So cognitive ecstasy is that.
Yeah.
It's contemplating certain kind of vastness,
yes,
and then finding the language that is poetic enough to implicate the implications of said vastness. You know.
You've done something really interesting. I think.
Yeah.
We're gonna psychoanalyze Jason on his podcast.
I love it. This is perfect.
No, but I've noticed this because you are very susceptible to complexity, and most people are not. And you have developed the ability to look for what I mean by complexity, right? To look for. So you will, when you look at nature, we'll be hiking around, and you will always point out some element of vastness, of geological time, of evolutionary, right? You've trained your brain not only to seek novelty, flow trigger, but to actually boost it up because you're looking for the complexity inside of it. That's a skill, right? And complexity is one of the hardest flow triggers. Most people are like, yeah, what can I do with this? Like unpredictability, I get. Like, I'll drive a different route home. That will work, by the way, right? Spend an entire day eating with your left hand if you're right-handed. Drive alternate, like do it over and over again. You're going to get little dopamine hits. Right?
Yeah.
It's flow. But complexity is a hard one for people to work with. You've gotten very good at it because you've trained your brain to not just find the novelty, but to find the complexity inside the novelty. That's a tricky one. That's hard. Not a lot of people do that. I don't even know if I can do it as well as you do.
Oh my God, dude, this is so interesting. So novelty, risk, all these things.
And by the way, risk
engagement.
is not just physical. Like, for all the people who think you have to be an athlete for flow. So first of all, let's talk about a couple of things on that tip.
Yeah.
One, work done by Csikszentmihalyi, work done by my old organization, work done by my current organization. Like, there's a lot of work along the way that shows that cognitive flow, intellectual risk, social risk, emotional risk, right? Just as potent as physical risk.
Right.
Physical
it hurls
risk
you into the present.
Only works for those people who enjoy physical risk. Right? If you're not wired for physical risk, and you know what I mean? Like,
I'm not that wired for physical risk.
That's not true. You grew up racing motorcycles,
That's true.
You did all this stuff.
That's
You've just
true.
denied that, so you're getting your dopamine elsewhere.
That's true. You know me well, don't you?
And I know your dad.
That's right. Well, this is very interesting. So, for me, so travel, beauty, right? Certain kinds of drugs. It's the combination of these things, back to the whole Michael Pollan list of the things that we commend for their capacity to hurl us into the flow of the present, and the present having these qualities of an unencumbered sense of first sight.
Yeah, but hold on one sec with the substances, because I just want to clarify this.
Yeah.
Like, you're not running around acting like a stoner. You are using marijuana just as disciplined as everything else, right? I like whatever.
That's right.
I always wanted to say this because, whatever people think is going on, I'm like, no, you don't understand. There's massive periods of enforced sobriety on the front end and on the back end and everything. Like, it's the whole container is totally built for the experience.
Oh, no, right? And I've mapped this out. So one of the best definitions that I ever came across that I think describes cannabis and other psychoactives is that these substances essentially create heightened resonance with set and setting. So they increase reactivity to stimuli.
Is that different than salience? Are you saying anything different than they crank up the salient network?
Maybe that means the same thing, but this is the phrase that I came across. This was from Rich Doyle writing about psychedelics in his book Darwin's Pharmacy. So,
great book.
Psychedelics increase reactivity to stimuli, both from within and from without, which is the same thing as saying you notice your own thoughts and reflections more. They're heightened. Your conscious processes are heightened. It's an amplifier of consciousness.
Right.
But it also is heightening your perceptual noticing of the sensate world. So this heightened resonance, heightened suggestibility to set and setting is just as important as the set and setting. And the reason why is, Alain de Botton in his wonderful book, The Art of Travel, says, you might look at a beautiful brochure of like a perfect palm tree island place, and then you spend all this money to fly 14 hours there, and then you fucking get there and you forget that you have to bring yourself along. So then you're there, and there's a fucking fly biting you and a mosquito, and it's fucking hot, and you're like, fuck, it's not as fun as the brochure. But I would argue it's because you went to the place and you're in the set and setting, but you didn't introduce the agent that increases reactivity to the stimuli. It's like you can fly across the world searching for paradise, but if you don't take 2 hits from that joint, the wallpaper won't do its work on you. So it's for me, I need to also make myself more porous. It's not just identify the external flow triggers. It's making myself more suggestible.
So if I would put it in neurobiological terms, right? Yeah. Salience is cranked way up, right? Which salience is just the stuff I can see the stuff that's in front of me, right? I'm paying attention to the stuff that's here right now. It's very salient to me, right? When you're hungry, food is salient.
Got it. So that's reactivity.
But, no. But the thing you're getting at, which Scott Barry Kaufman, who you also know, has done some cool work on this as well, latent inhibition, which is really, it's a weird phrase, but what it means is how long can you hold something in your brain before your brain attaches meaning to it? Because the minute the brain goes meaning, you're done. The novelty's gone, right? So the problem with the old patterns, right? Like
the things you've already done.
Your brain automatically assigns the meaning. So we're like
that's called the been there's and see that's of the adult's mind.
Cannabis, anandamide, as a neuro.
So for those that don't know, anandamide is the naturally occurring version of cannabis that we have in our brains, and you can, I guess, up juice it when you
up juice it. I mean,
when you take cannabis.
Yes, up juice it.
Sorry,
I don't uprate. I don't dial it up.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're right. Up juice it.
Up
juice it's a technical term.
No, but go into this.
It appears, and I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done, and I don't think this latent inhibition allows information comes in, it's really salient, right? Like when you're high, you notice everything in your environment, but you don't immediately say it means this, right? The minute you pause, there's a little pause, and in that little pause, what the brain is doing is instead of it being a tight cluster of neurons that are just talking to itself, right? Mm-hmm. Your whole brain is talking to itself, right? So you can get far bigger context, far more meaning comes in. One of the reasons flow is so meaningful, right? Like you got to ask yourself this question, like where does that meaning come from? I think one of the places it's coming from is you're literally you're not looking at your reality through new eyes. You're looking at your reality and you're just not judging it as quickly. You're literally not judging it. So one of the things that actually happens in flow is there's a part of your brain, part of the medial prefrontal cortex, that is specifically, and most of that part of your brain actually stays really active in flow. This part shuts down, and it's fast negative judgments, usually about others and things like
negatively that. Negatively preconfiguring whatever's happening.
Exactly.
Prejudging.
So that goes away.
So all of us, so this reminds me, this is David Lenson in his book On Drugs.
Which we both love.
Which you turned me on to. And he has a chapter on cannabis where he's explaining one of the things that it does. The phrase is what he calls a dialectical pattern of reconcilable estrangement with everyday perception. So cannabis creates...
That's a lot of words.
Yeah.
But yes.
So essentially, cannabis creates a new distance between you and the familiar thing. That's that lag that you're talking about. That's that space you're talking about. Yeah, right, this new distance between you and that familiar relationship with that thing you're looking at, and then allows you to forge a new relationship with that thing that closes that distance. So it creates an estrangement. It makes strange, which, by the way, is congruent with objects of beauty. Mm-hmm. Whenever you see something beautiful, it's strange. You're stuck in there's this lag where you're like looking at, you can't believe what you're seeing, and then a subsequent reconciliation, a new relationship that then closes that distance. Mm-hmm. And that's why he says things seem to attain when you're high on cannabis and in that beautiful halo, things attain an archetypal quality. So a landscape will look like a landscape painting. Every object stands for all of its class, right? A tree, specific tree, becomes the archetype of treeness, and that's why.
I don't know if that's just his experience.
Well,
Maybe
he's a comparative literature professor.
Very good weed.
But it resonates.
It resonates.
But it resonates with me back to what you were saying, the salience and this space and this lag between the shorthand judgment and algorithms that we already have developed as adults. I know what this is. Oh, I've been on this hike before. I know where I am. Oh, this is just another hike. Or I know this person. I've talked to this person 1,000 times. I don't have to listen to this person. Like the been there's and seen that's of the adult mind, the familiar algorithms, the autopilot. But then that flow and the flow that follows focus, and then introducing something like cannabis that creates a new distance between you and the everyday perception and the new relationship that closes that distance. But then you combine that with actual novelty.
Do you think cognitive biases would be lowered when you're stoned?
I would
You'd
think
have
so.
to argue
I would
based
think
on
so.
this. That's interesting. You can test that. We can test that.
We can test it. But this is where this gets interesting because, so if you're combining this agent, this medicine or this flow agent called cannabis, which increases salience, heightens perception, and facilitates, it creates a new distance between you and that which you're perceiving, this space that you're talking about. But then you're not just taking cannabis in a familiar place to make that familiar place new again. You're actually combining the cannabis with an actual novel place. Then you're compounding the effects.
Well,
and then the last thing I would add is the short-term memory disruption.
Well, that's where I was
plays a role here.
Yeah,
so Michael
Pollan
says,
forgetting.
The importance of forgetting.
Yeah.
So he says that the short-term memory disruption, by the way, it's not that it makes you forget who you are or forget your own insights, but what it does is it makes it so that your pool of sense impressions drains as quickly as it fills. So it makes the passing moment into a discrete series of present nows, one after the other. So like, let's say I'm looking at this landscape. My pool of sense impression fills. I'm overwhelmed by what I'm looking at. And then I keep walking and I turn around and my pool of sense impression drained just as quickly and now filled in by the next stimuli.
Let me ask you two questions on this.
Yeah.
So there's my big hero, William James, one of the first, who came up with the idea of stream of consciousness. So the idea that you're talking about, that was his. Yeah. But he tried to measure how long does the now last, right? Okay. Very hysterical study, because he literally sat in his office at Harvard in the 1880s, 90s with a stopwatch trying to time his thoughts. And he came up with, he said it was 12 to 30 seconds. And interestingly, we have now measured that using atomic clock. It's about 14 seconds. He was off by 2 seconds.
The now lost 14 seconds.
But there are versions of the now that will last 30 seconds. You have an orgasm. That's a now that it's going to last a little longer than 14 seconds, right? Uh-huh. So my question is, do you think that cannabis extends the now? Do you think the now is longer?
Well, I think it's like a sustain pedal. So it's like if you're playing the piano and you hit a chord, right? And then I think cannabis hits the sustain pedal on the chord. In Spanish, the expression is te quedas pegado, which basically means like you stay stuck for a minute, a little longer
like
on whatever you're looking
at.
The
experience, front end of awe, right?
Yeah, like the reverb is heightened.
Oh, okay. Got it.
And so it hits a sustain pedal. And then I would argue that the set and setting is the melody, the note, and you are the instrument. So you are the instrument, and then you heighten your
thinking about this metaphor a while?
Yeah. You heighten your reactivity to stimuli by taking in the cannabis, which increases salience and this and that. And then you go to this novel environment, which is the melody. And by being more receptive to the melody is instrumenting you. Not to mention that the cannabis is also hitting a sustain pedal on that which is being instrumented. So you're basically taken for a magic carpet ride in the now, followed by more now, followed by more now, followed by more now. And by the time you pop out on the other side, you have this feeling that time disappeared from that experience, And then there's a guy called Mark Levitin, I believe, who wrote a book about the neuroscience of music.
Yeah. Daniel Levitin.
So he had a section where he was talking about why people enjoy listening to music when they're high on cannabis.
He says, by the way, in the middle of, he writes another book you should read called The Organized Mind.
Okay.
That if people just listening, if you want, if you're just a little geeked on neuroscience and you just want to know a general overview of how the brain works, his Organized Mind is amazing. He has a section in there on flow and talks about how flow does specifically activate some of your language centers.
Okay,
and
that makes sense.
Does make sense a lot in the context of this context.
And so what he was saying is that the same short-term memory disruption that is actually a feature, a utility of cannabis, The same thing that Michael Pollan was saying, your pool of sense impression fills, but then drains as quickly as it fills with bathes experience in this interesting texture. He says that that's what makes listening to music so much more potent when you're in a cannabis-induced flow, because you stop predicting what's coming next in the song. So you're experiencing the song note to note, precisely because of the short-term memory disruption. So when you're hearing music and you're experiencing the music note to note, the part of you that's heard the song before that's predicting what's going to happen next, and that goes away. So you're actually experiencing the music note to note.
It's not just cannabis, right? All you need is flow.
We'll do that too.
Right, flow will do it too.
Sure,
right?
sure.
No cannabis required. But it's the same chemical. It's ananandamide.
Anandamide, which the brain naturally produces endogenously.
Exactly.
So I guess that's a beautiful phrase or a melody of describing the halo of being in the flow of the present. That is literally full of wonder. Wonder being the byproduct of that unencumbered sense of first sight to which the adult brain has closed itself. That unencumbered sense of first sight is essentially living life note to note. You're fully in the halo of the present. You're living it as it happens. And there's a freedom in that because the inner chatter is pushed away, obliterated. Right?
Well,
I mean, is that why it feels so good? How come it feels so good to me?
Well, this happens in flow. This happens a little bit in cannabis. The prefrontal cortex, right, part of your brain that's right back here, gets really quiet in flow, right? And your inner critic, which lives in the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex mostly, which is out here basically. Dorsal means up, lateral means side, right? Dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex is the up, outside, front part of my brain, whatever, for people who hear these terms and go, what the it's a fancy way of saying up front here. The brain is really hard to navigate. We've got lots of weird language for where things are. But that's what all those fancy words mean. And also, I do have to say, I wish neuroscientists would just settle on a set of terminology, because the brain has been mapped like 7 different times, and everything's got like 15 different names. It's really annoying. Okay. Anyways, that's where your inner critic lives, right? And that gets dialed down. Transient, temporary hypofrontality, right? The temporary deactivation of the prefrontal cortex shows up in flow, also shows up with cannabis, right? Little different, but very similar. And so your inner critic is going away. Yeah. Plus everything else we've been talking about, right?
The increased salience, and the stimulation,
so you're not only is your normal reaction gone, but the voice in your head that normally when you have that normal reaction, the voice in your head that goes, see, told you, you're a loser. Yeah, of course that was going to happen.
That's right. That's right.
So not only the prediction's gone, but your predictive reaction, right? Your psychosis that's, like, by the time you're an adult is tied to your predictions, right?
Well, that's what Ernest Becker said. He says psychosis is just neurosis pushed to its extreme. So, yeah. But that's very interesting, man. And I'm trying to, kind of harness that into, we've gone on all these tangents, but we're talking about flow. We're talking about building our lives around flow. We're talking about the fact that flow requires just as much discipline as it does surrender, that there's a kind of cult of surrender of people that just expect flow to happen all the time, and it really can't, and that there's a lot of fetching water and chopping wood and flow cycles and rest cycles and all this discipline that goes into orienting your life around this state. Then we've talked about the different triggers that we can kind of bring into the preconditions that we can work with to get ourselves more flow. And this includes novelty and travel and exposure to art, violating expectations, taking up a new hobby, and then, of course, taking exogenous chemicals. We're talking a lot about cannabis and flow. So perhaps we can give some closing thoughts about the relationship between flow and just other ecstatic altered states of consciousness. Like, how much do other altered states build on flow? How are they parallel? How are they happening side by side? Because we live, again, in Stealing Fire, you wrote about the altered states economy, the $1 trillion a year that people spend to get out of their heads. Is that just basically them getting into flow?
4 trillion, by the way.
4 trillion, because they want to go to the movies, they go to concerts, they want to get drunk on alcohol, they want to take vacations, they want to smoke joints, they maybe go to Burning Man and maybe take other psychedelics. So how much of the altered states economy builds on just flow, or is it flow plus? Is it flow and? Maybe get a little bit into that.
So,
because I don't want this to feel like we're just like peddling substances that people take to get high. This is actually about something that
No,
your brain naturally produces, and it just so happens that there's lubricants that can help us get there, like flow triggers, like cannabis, like concerts, like beauty, like art, like travel. You know?
Csikszentmihalyi has argued very eloquently, great article, that you can't, there's a textbook. They put out a textbook of Csikszentmihalyi's collected works. In the middle of the textbook is this Italian, he did an interview with this Italian magazine called Flow in the Soul, and they translated it, and the only copy you can find is in this textbook. But it's an astounding article.
Wow. You always have you have to send me this recommendation. Flow and the Soul.
Written by Csikszentmihalyi. So Csikszentmihalyi, it's so funny because and I've known him for a while, and the longer I am a student of his work, the more impressed I get. Every time I find something else that he's written, he is really one of the better philosophical thinkers of the 20th century, disguised as a psychologist.
Good.
Right?
Good. Well, they usually are.
Right, of course.
Ernest Becker wrote Denial of Death. He was a psychoanalyst, and I think he's a philosopher in
He says that everything we think of as art in a lot of culture are just literally the byproducts of ways that we found to produce flow. So Ernest Becker's theory about denial of death, he's sort of and they could both be right? Like,
so it's not our fear of death, it's just a response. It's basically our art is a trip report that came out of flow.
Our art is an attempt, it's a seeking report. It's like it's the byproduct, right? But it's not, the art is it's what happened. The point was I want the flow, right? And I want it because it's hard here. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just hard here.
It's hard
a difficult world.
That's right.
And it hurts a lot.
That's right.
And in flow, it goes away for a little bit, right? Flow redeems suffering. It, without a doubt, it absolutely redeems this. I always say this about peak performance. And so I have a book that I'm working on right now called The Art of Impossible. And it's a big peak performance book. It'll be out in a couple of years. And in it, very early on, I point out to people, look, this is not a book about happy or sad. If you're happy or sad are things that happen on the way to peak performance, right? They're not like, if you're hung up on happy and sad and want to get more happy and don't do this stuff. Peak performance is not pleasant.
Right. You always used to say this is the states north of happy that we're talking about.
Well, north of happy those are all the altered states. Okay. So to get back to your question, so Csikszentmihalyi to
flow in the soul.
Well, all I was saying, that was the art, and right.
I want to get the paper.
There are a lot. So the interesting flow is a very controlled state, right? You are in total control. It's your creative drive turned all the way up. But this is one of the 6 core characteristics. It's a sense of control. I have control over my life.
And so yet you feel like you're not there at the same time.
And yet you're not there. But there's a whole other category of altered state experiences, right? Which are the category where you have no control. Possession experiences, for example. There are a lot of trance states, right? Where what you're doing is you're totally giving up that control.
Okay.
And some people really like those. You know what I mean? Like, I always wonder. Some people, I have friends who would take psychedelics and they would go have conversations with Norse gods and things like that. And I was like, wow, I just take psychedelics and I'm stoned. I'm just like myself, but I'm more fucked up, right? It's not like, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm not like, I'm just a guy on drugs. You're having I don't have that experience. Maybe it's because I never let go of that control. I don't ever go. Even with DMT, I can always find myself. I always can find myself in the experience, and I have a feeling that there are a whole bunch of people who can't. And the people who can't, they seem to love that experience as much as I love flow, right? Like, so I'm hesitant to judge an experience I don't really have a deep understanding of at all in terms of what's better, what's worse, how do they relate. I just want to acknowledge that there's in the altered state space, control is a really interesting. Nobody talks about it, but it's a really good.
And people often criticize me for loving it so much because they say that I'm missing out. And I'm like, yeah, but the moments when I actually feel the most in control, I feel effortless effort. So it's control and surrender at the same time. I'm like the conductor of the orchestra. I'm doing an amazing job in my conducting, but I don't feel like I'm trying really hard to remain in control.
The thing you also
I'm surfing.
But the thing you always have to point out to people is, look, we're like literally we're all fundamentally wired different, right? Like one of the reasons I'm just a guy on drugs in psychedelic literature, they call me a hardhead, right? It means I need massive quantities of certain substances, but it's not just psychedelic substances, and it's genetic. So when I go to have surgery, I got to go in and I got to be like, guys, you got to give me 2 or 3 times as much morphine because it won't work on me. So does my mother.
Yeah.
It's genetic. It's our receptor sites are damped down, blah, blah, blah. My point on this is people like what they're wired for, and they seem to conflate what their own personal wiring is with some kind of big metaphysical cosmic thing so they can, defend it to you or their way is better. Like, no, we're wired differently. Okay. You like this, I like this. Come on.
So this is very interesting because we have about 8 minutes left, and maybe we can get a little bit into this. There's no doubt that orienting your life around flow, identifying what your flow triggers are, creating a flow checklist, being disciplined about your surrender, and whatever it is that you output when you're in flow, whether it's painting or dance or playing an instrument or writing or an elite sport, whatever it is.
Or coding or architecture or business.
Everything.
Or, come on.
Everything. Okay. That we know that it's, it's amazing cocktail of neurochemistry, that it can boost well-being and health. There's a million reasons why we should build our lives around flow. I mean, it helped you recover from Lyme disease. Surfing saved your life. We never got into the story, but it's okay. But I'd like to talk about also what happens, particularly on the edges of flow, when you go into like ego-dissolving flow or psychedelically mediated altered states of consciousness experiences, where people, go to these spaces. And the acronym is STIR, these places of selflessness and timelessness and richness and access to information.
Effortlessness is the E in STIR.
Yeah. When people spend too much time in STIR, when they're taking too many psychedelics and they're just pushing that envelope, you mentioned this once, the problem with STIR, I mean, the gift of STIR is that you're in the present and how blissful and freeing that is. But the dangers of STIR is that when you're in that present, everything happens now. So often people can come out of these edges of flow, these psychedelically addled flow states, when they're spending too much time in there. They have a rich interior experience. And that interior experience, I would argue, is poetic truth, not empirical truth. It's like that Alain de Botton line where he says, a journalist may be more accurate in describing the details of an event than a poet. But a poet may nevertheless reveal truths of a deeper sort that are beyond the literal grid. These are different domains of human experience, the outside and the inside. Ursula Le Guin says, science describes accurately from the outside, poetry describes accurately from the inside. Science explicates, poetry implicates, right? But these separations are like church and state. And so when you have a spiritual flow, psychedelically mediated experience, and you have a poetic experience, an ineffable experience, a communion with the cosmos, something that is fundamentally poetry, fundamentally church. But then you come out of the experience and you're preaching from the perspective of fundamentally state. Like, you have an ego-dissolving experience of flow, and then you think that you are now the mouthpiece of empirical reality.
Yeah,
like, why do so many people who go to these far reaches of consciousness become like self-righteous, cult-like figures who think their shit doesn't stink? So where is the humility post-flow?
Number one rule, never trust the dopamine. Never trust the dopamine. And seriously, don't go shopping in flow. Because you got massive amounts of dopamine, and one of the things dopamine does is it amplifies pattern recognition, right? So you'll buy everything. Don't believe your apocalyptic visions in flow. Why? One, your pattern recognition system is all fired up, so you're finding stuff, links, right? I'm the only one who sees them. One. Two, ego dissolution, and this is one of the giant puzzles of psychology, is what is it about having your ego dissolve that when it comes back, it's twice as big?
Bigger than ever, yeah.
Right? It's bigger than ever.
Now you're the mouthpiece of the universe. And you know why I always call my videos poetry? Because I don't want anybody to ever think that I'm having a messiah complex or that there's any kind of self-righteousness about the truth behind what I'm saying. As long as I call my work a song or a poem, I can take poetic license to reflect upon my own reflections out of a flow state, link domains together and find through lines. But I'm like, hey man, this is freestyle rap. This is a poem. The minute that I'm like, join the church of Jason Silva, I would make myself sick. But so many people they kind of want you to make that, to cross that threshold from like my interior landscape, and if you can resonate with it, that's art. Beautiful. But my interior landscape as the mouthpiece of fact, no.
Right.
And too many people out there are pretending to be the messengers because of that.
I swear to God, if I meet one more teenager with a funny hat who wants to put me through a cacao ceremony, I mean, I swear to God, if I don't kill a millennial by the end of my life, I'll be lucky. Okay, so that said, no, so the other thing is the danger of timelessness is your point, right? Is when you're in a timeless space, everything feels really immediate. So you get a lot of people, and this is really, I'm seeing this a lot in the Burning Man tech community, right? There's all these apocalypse right now guys, right? Like running around, and the funniest thing too is like, were they not around for like the year 2000? Did they not read, like Daniel Pinchbeck is the classic example, and I love Daniel. He's a nice guy. Breaking Over the Head was a great book. But he went down to South America. He did a lot of drugs. He didn't realize that the now that he thought, right? And he came back and he wrote a book about how the world is going to end and blah, blah, blah. And he put a date on it. And this is really common, right? This is really common. There are known psychiatric syndromes based on this kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and this is where I'd like to sort of wrap up, is like we're celebrating and rhapsodizing over how intoxicating and healing and beautiful these domains of consciousness are, whether it's flow or whether it's derivatives of flow and altered states, and the trillions of dollars we spend every year to get out of our heads, and it's beautiful. But that we must be careful with the revelations or divinations that come through, because what happens is so often what comes through feels paranoid and apocalyptic, and there's always this idea that like the system is about to collapse, and planetary collapse and civilizational collapse. And granted, there's things that are wrong in the world, there's things that need to be addressed, but my intuition is much more a la Steven Pinker, Peter Diamandis, Singularity University. I see astounding progress.
Well, I wrote Abundance with Peter, so I'm not. I
see Stuart Brand. I see Kevin Kelly at the Long Now Foundation. You don't see them like freaking out about planetary collapse as much as the more contemporary psychedelically addled mouthpieces that we're seeing. Like, I see more progress coming our way.
What is it exactly about cryptocurrencies and psychedelics that seem to lead people to believe the world is going to end tomorrow? Like, I don't understand what like.
Well, it's patternicity, right?
Oh, maybe that is.
It's a kind of psychosis, seeing patterns that aren't there. But if you're a sophisticated mind, you can find a through line that self-justifies itself.
One of the best ways to stop this, right? Not do this, and one of the best ways to hack flow, right? This is so at the end of a psychedelic experience and a flow experience, you still have that dopamine in your brain. Your brain is finding all those connections and connections and connections. Yeah. Cut it off. Literally, like, go do something. Walk away from the back end of a flow state. Don't ride it to the bitter end. But that's where a lot of that stuff happens, because the dopamine is what's left and is looking for those connections so you can continue the ride even more.
Interesting.
Right? And I just think it's what are the odds that the universe spoke specifically to you?
Well,
You, right? Like, what are the odds?
Yeah.
Right? So you just gotta like ask yourself when you have the big reveal, you're like, okay, but let's work the statistics on this just for a second.
Totally. Or just remember that, the big reveal within the landscape or the cosmos of your mind might be the big reveal that tells you, how you can heal your own life and move forward. And the minute you try to be the mouthpiece for everyone else, you're merging church and state.
And let me
you're
ask
going
you a
from
question.
poetry, your own ontological poetry, to scripture. And we don't want that. We don't want militancy. We don't want self-righteousness. We don't want anybody being the mouthpiece against everyone else. That's what we don't want.
I also think...
And we got to wrap it up soon, by the way.
For sure. You're well-read in philosophy. You're well-read in psychology. So you know well enough... Like, when you have one of these big ideas and you come back, you can say to yourself, oh, yeah, well, that was Spinoza's idea before me, or
That's
was,
right.
blah, 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 or
I love connecting it to other people.
Poor man's blah, blah, blah.
I always want to find the person who had an idea analogous to my revelation, and I want to cite them. And that shows the work, the rigor, the discipline.
Exactly.
I meet so many people at Burning Man who had one psychedelic experience. They've never read a book by William James. They've never read a book by Eric Davis. They've never read one of your books. They've never really paid attention to any psychedelic literature. But they had one psychedelic experience, and now they're like, I really want to start a blog because I have a message that I think the world needs to listen to. And I'm like, okay, why should the world listen to you? Have you done any actual fetching water and chopping wood, or you just had one trip that told you you're the Messiah? And you can tell they haven't thought it through.
Right.
They just feel like all of a sudden they have a message they want to share with the world
exactly.
and feel entitled to share that message.
Maybe we should stop here.
Okay. Much love to everyone. Use flow with caution. Steven, thank you for your time. I could talk to you for 1,000 hours.
So good.
Cheers, bro.
Thank you.
All right.